The base has spoken and the message is clear. The Republican Party in 2024 still belongs to Donald Trump. So it's time to unite. It's time to strategize. It's time to win, because I, for one, cannot take another 4 years of Obama. I mean, Joe Biden. I also can't take another 4 years of Republicans taking a loss and blaming a rigged election, because failure is not an option. Not again. My show starts now.
I really think this is time now for everybody, our country, to come together. We want to come together, whether it's Republican or Democrat or liberal or conservative. It would be so nice if we could come together and straighten out the world and straighten out the problems and straighten out all of the death and destruction that we're witnessing. That's practically never been like this. It's just so important.
Donald J. Trump didn't just win Iowa, he owned Iowa on Monday night. With around 50% of the vote, he sailed to a quick and decisive victory. It's important to note that Governor Ron DeSantis came in second place and Icky Nikki Haley did not. But someone apparently forgot to tell her that.
I can safely say tonight, Iowa made this Republican primary a two-person race.
Icky Nikki Haley over there acting like the Queen of Sheba, annoying as ever. You know, Nikki should take on Joe Biden for the Democratic nomination. It's much more fitting for someone of her ideology. I'm sure she will do well in New Hampshire, but eventually she will drop out and scurry back to the board of Boeing or Lockheed Martin to collect her paycheck, because Nikki is and always has been about the bag and nothing more. Let's just hope Donald Trump is wise enough to keep her far, far away from the ticket. Joining me now with his take on it all, former White House press secretary and host of the Sean Spicer Show, Sean Spicer. All right, Sean, just right off the go here. Is Donald Trump going to be our nominee? Do you feel as confident as ever saying that?
Yes, 100%. He rolled through Iowa. I think you put it very, very aptly. He owned it. I think he will win New Hampshire. Remember, after New Hampshire, there's a month until the South Carolina primary, and Donald Trump is up by 30 points there. The people who know Nikki Haley the best are largely rejecting her. And then you wait another couple of weeks and you go into March 5th, the Super Tuesday primaries, which, you're talking about running a national campaign. I don't think anyone aside from the Trump campaign has the ability to do that. My guess is both DeSantis and Haley drop out before that.
Do you think we're going to see Ron DeSantis perhaps after New Hampshire decide it's time to cut his losses?
There's a school of thought, Tommy, that says that he stays in to South Carolina and tries to downplay it. And that's why he went there right off the bat. He went to South Carolina to make this head fake that I'm not competing in New Hampshire, like as if that was his choice. I mean, he's in fourth place in the poll behind Chris Christie, who dropped out. So I think he had to show that there was some other path. And by going to South Carolina, again, which is 32 days from now, didn't make a ton of sense, but it was his way of trying to play down the results of New Hampshire. He will have some big donors that give him money to his super PAC to allow him to go forward. But my question would be, okay, let's just say you pulled a rabbit out of a hat in South Carolina. Then where do you go? You walk into 10 states in March 5th on Super Tuesday, and there's no chance you'll get blown out there. So I think he's just looking for that off ramp. Where can I get off that saves a little bit of face?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, so Iowa here is interesting to me because, back obviously 2015, 2016, Donald Trump was not necessarily leading in all the polls like he is now. He lost Iowa in 2016 to Ted Cruz. Obviously, Ted Cruz did not end up becoming our president. So in this case, is Iowa so important just because of the margin that Trump won by and blowing out the rest in such a dramatic way?
Yeah, I think you put your finger on it. Look, he won every one of those counties. He won evangelical voters. He won first-time caucus goers. He won rural voters. And I think what it showed, and the largest margin of victory was 12.8%, 41%, the high water mark. He blew both of those historical norms out of the water. The point is that the lead is so insurmountable. As I mentioned, South Carolina, 30 points that Trump is up there. New Hampshire, he's up. And in the past, where people are looking at this historically wrong is that you've never had basically a de facto incumbent running in the field. And so Trump doesn't have to spend the money that others do. You looked at the spend per vote in Iowa. Trump's well known by every single person there. He's going to be well known in New Hampshire and South Carolina and throughout the country. So he has a much lower spend threshold that he needs to. It's a totally, totally different dynamic. And to look at it through the perspective of history is like trying to look at a football game through the lens of a bunch of baseball players. And it just doesn't, it's two different games right now that we're playing. And that's where I think a lot of the mainstream legacy left-wing reporters who parachute into Iowa after swinging by the Georgetown Patagonia don't really appreciate what's happening here. So the long answer to your question is yes. I mean, this is Trump's now to lose. I think the reason that some people are staying in, Haley and DeSantis, is they think that something's going to happen to Trump. They are the understudy, the cover band, if you will, that just hopes that one night they're getting the call and say, hey, they can't play tonight. Can you step in? That's just not going to happen before Super Tuesday.
Yeah, well, I think that if something were to happen to Trump, meaning something legally that would be disastrous, I think that that's not going to happen during this primary process. It would happen closer to the general election. And even then, I don't see under any circumstances Donald Trump dropping out under any circumstances behind bars. I don't see him dropping out in a straight suit. I don't see him dropping out. I just don't see him dropping out under any circumstance whatsoever.
You know, when you said that, Tommy, I was thinking back to the jetway in October of 2016, going on to an American Airlines flight, and my phone literally blowing up like, you've got to see what's going on. And it was the Access Hollywood tape. Oh, yes. We're on our way to that debate in St. Louis. And if that wasn't to get Trump to drop out, you think a criminal indictment's going to get him to drop out. So when you said that, I couldn't help but just remember what it was like for those 48 hours.
So I actually remember that vividly as well, because I was sitting in Ohio because I was supposed to do a tailgate event with Don Jr. the next day. And then that tape came out, and then it was like, we don't know if like a tailgate with the fraternities is maybe the best look right now. Back then, I think now they would still do it, quite honestly.
It's like, hey,
yeah,
we're going to play it for everybody. Come on.
Yeah. So I think now times have definitely changed, but I remember that as well. I also remember after that flying to New York and going into like the Trump war room area. And I remember some of the younger staffers there handing out mega hats. Do you want this? Because we might be done at this point. Do you want one? Here, take a few of them. And I was like, yeah, I don't think it's over. I'll take a few because I would love to just have more, but I don't think it's over. And everybody was walking around Trump Tower just like solemn, like, oh God, it's over. And it definitely was not over. So thinking back to the glory days of all of it, I hope that we're setting ourselves up for something like that now. I think things have changed drastically since then. The game has changed since then. We didn't have the early voting and the mail-in voting, and we didn't have, obviously, for indictments. So times have definitely changed. But I want to turn now, speaking of the media and the way that they're covering this, I want to turn now to one of our friends over on MSNBC. She had a lot to say after Iowa, a lot of insight. Now, at first, she said Nikki Haley, who apparently she's a fan of, I'm not surprised, or at least somewhat a fan of, she has a unique take over at MSNBC as to why Nikki Haley lost Iowa, came in third. Let's take a listen.
New Hampshire.
And I think to the point that you made, Steph, I mean, it's the elephant in the room. She's still a brown lady that's got to try to win in a party that is deeply anti-immigrant and which accepts the notion that you can say immigrants are poisoning the blood of our country. She's getting, birthered by Donald Trump. And I don't care how much the donor class likes her, which will ramp up a lot, the better she does in New Hampshire. So it's still a challenge. I don't see how she becomes the nominee of that party with Donald Trump still around. I can't picture it happening. Maybe it could happen. Ron DeSantis' only argument for staying in it is he's the white guy, that he can still make the appeal to whitey.
She's full of a lot of nuggets. Let's talk about that one, though. Nikki Haley didn't win Iowa because I think what she's saying is that people in Iowa are just too white and they don't like Nikki Haley because she is not as white as they are. Is that what she's trying to tell us?
Well, that's what she's trying to tell us. I always get a kick, by the way, just at the beginning of all of these folks trying to talk about the Republican Party as if they have a clue or conservatism. This is a woman who lied about at the FBI. I mean, she has got a storied history about her homophobic past and a lot of the comments that she's made. So I really don't put a ton of stock into it, but I do get a kick out of the thing that I found was more fascinating when that was happening is the panel around her, right? Joy Reid is known for saying crazy stuff, stupid stuff, false stuff. But the idea that the rest of the panel sat there and nodded their head just proves to, I mean, it's proof positive, that pot is legal and that they all must have gotten high, because the idea that you can sit there and either not laugh or be aghast at what she just said is a major problem. I mean, Nikki Haley lost for a ton of reasons, none of which have to do with the color of her skin.
Do you think that there's something to that, though, that everybody else that was sitting around that table? I mean, I don't think Jen Psaki's ever going to question Joy Reid, because I think if she were to say, oh, no, maybe people in Iowa are not racist, I think then she would be called a racist. I think that when someone like Joy Reid talks, you have to sit there and you have to listen if you're a white liberal Democrat, and you have to nod your head in agreement whether you really believe it or not. And Jen Psaki very well might believe it. But I think there's probably something to that as well, that you just have to take what she says and you have to agree with it, because otherwise you're going to be on the chopping block.
Absolutely. Yeah. That is not a safe space. I mean, no matter how nuts and crazy Joy Reid sounds, you cannot be the one, if you're at MSNBC, to question her. As I said, I mean, she's got a storied history of making up crazy things and nothing has stuck to her. Right. So I think the idea that she throws this out there, that probably resonates really well with the MSNBC audience. And the irony, by the way, is these are the same people who talk about disinformation and misinformation, democracy, and all this crap. And yet they're the first ones to spread it at the same time. And as you said, I mean, Jen Psaki, who prides herself on her time at the State Department, at the White House, and all this, sits there and nods her head, because you're absolutely right. If she said anything, they'd go nuts.
Right. Well, it seems to me that Joy just hates white people in general. Like, I think she just hates white people, but especially white Christians. She goes on to also take issue with white Christians in Iowa. Let's take a listen to that nugget of greatness.
Is that these are white Christians? That this is a state that is overrepresented by white Christians that are going to participate in these caucuses, yes. Especially tonight. Earlier today, reached out to Robbie Jones from the Public Religion Research Institute, knowing that we were going to talk about Iowa. And this is a hyper evangelical white state. And he said the following to me: Iowa is about 61% white Christian. The country as a whole is approximately 41% white Christian. And in Iowa, we're talking about evangelical white Christians. And he said the following. Because I asked him, what do they get out of supporting Donald Trump? Because he keeps losing, he keeps delivering losses and losses and losses. And he said the following: they see themselves as the rightful inheritors of this country, and Trump has promised to give it back to them.
Can you imagine, Sean, anybody sitting on any network and saying that about any other race or religion? But white Christians seem to be fair game.
To your point, you start looking at what's happening with Hamas and so many of these other organizations. If you switch out that, to your point, if you switched out and said black or brown or Hispanic, whatever, people would go nuts. The idea that you're attacking white Christians is insane. I mean, again, if we put Jews in there, these days, who knows, maybe we wouldn't get as much hatred. But if you change that to Muslims and said, hey, in Michigan, there's a huge Muslim population, that's why they're voting, I mean, people would be calling you a racist and a xenophobic and all sorts of crazy names. It does blow my mind that they get away with this kind of stuff. Every time I say that, people on the right look at me and say, are you kidding? How are you? It bothers me as an American that that's what they think, and that's what they get away with, and that there's no backlash. As I said, if we switched out the groups, you'd be getting killed. But the broader thing that I think is fascinating is whether you're Christian or Jew or Muslim or whatever, I think the more we are a religious people, the better. If you think about it at its core, Christianity, you look at the 10 Commandments, right? Love one another, don't steal, don't kill, don't covet your neighbor's wife. Those are things that, yes, while rooted in the 10 Commandments, are just about being a good person. They're being a good neighbor. They're being a good American. There's nothing in that says, my God, don't kill. That's, my religion really supports that. And so if you can have a group of people, and if we become more religious in general, then I think that's a good thing for the country. And the idea that she's denouncing that. And as I said earlier, in the previous comments, the idea that the panel is sitting there and just sitting back and shaking their head. This goes back to, it's interesting. All these folks on the left, when they get attacked, they love to say they're religious. Like, so if you ask, Joe Biden always says, well, I'm a Catholic, as if they want to make sure that that it's okay. Like they're good to criticize that group, whether or not they're practicing or whatever. It's just fascinating to me that they were willing to go down a plank pretty far, but they won't completely jump. And so anyway, I find the thing just it's scary that we're at a place in a country where we'd want people to be more religious. We want them to be more caring and concerned about each other. And yet she gets away with this kind of critique.
I don't even think she has such a problem with Christians. I think it's the white Christians that she has a problem with. I think if she were being completely transparent about what she thinks, she would say that she looks down on white, middle class, lower class, white, maybe Christians, but mostly just white people, what people characterize as Trump supporters, people that go to NASCAR races, people that live in middle America, people that go to Walmart. I mean, we've heard it before. That's what they think of Trump supporters. That's how they classify them. They would never want to be around people like that. They probably haven't spent a lot of time around people like that, so they look down on people like that, and I think that's exactly what they do. And I think that the white hate for white lower class individuals is something that the Democrat Party also struggles with, because it's not just Joy. It's not even just Democrats. I think some Republicans who are the never Trumpers also look down on white, middle and lower class Trump voters. And I quite frankly think they have such a disdain for those people because they feel like they're beneath them.
Yeah, well, it's true. And the irony, by the way, as someone who grew up in a working class family and then, watched the evolution of the parties, the Democrats were always supposed to be the party of the working class, the union men and women, the people who worked with their hands and were the backbone of the middle class. And now the Democrats are the party of the elite. They have no problem, whether it's academia or Hollywood or corporate America. And it's the Republican Party. And I think largely the transformation has occurred or completed its transformation under Donald Trump, because he gave voice to a lot of these folks and said, that party doesn't stand for you. They don't value you. They don't respect you. We do. And I do. And I know what it's like. And I think it's a fascinating shift from someone who spent my life in politics to watch the evolution of the Republican Party and the conservative movement truly being about so many folks, in the working class.
Yeah, no, they really do.
It's been a big, big change.
They really do. I remember when the song Rich Men from Richmond came out, and the left was all upset about and bent out of shape about that one too, saying it was like a right-wing battle cry. Turns out the guy really isn't politically affiliated and has jabs for both sides, but they really hated that too. They hate country music as a whole, unless it's, liberal country music that's not really country music. They're just really showing their true colors, and it's not going to get any better from here on out. But I want to also ask you, I mentioned in the opening, I hope Donald Trump does not pick Nikki Haley as a running mate. I don't think he would do that. I'm really hoping he wouldn't do that. Yeah. But who do you think would be the best choice? A lot of people saying he has to pick a woman. I don't like when we put things in boxes like it has to be a woman or it has to be a person of color. I just would like him to pick somebody that's the most advantageous to his cause and his agenda. But who do you think, some names stick out to you who he might pick?
So first of all, I agree with you on Haley. I mean, look, you've had Don Jr. and Tucker and all these guys make it very clear that if she were under serious consideration, they would campaign against the ticket. Tucker has said that. Don has just said he's against Nikki. I don't want to put Don in a box. I think if I had to pick the top four, All right, let me give you my top 6. I think it's in no particular order right off the bat. Kristi Noem.
No,
Sarah
Sean, I was
Sanders.
worried that you were going to say that.
No. Listen,
Scratch it
you're
off
not
the
asking
list.
me. Hold on. Let me just give you, like, first of all, I'm telling you what I think, not what I want.
Okay.
Kristi Noem, Sarah Sanders, Elise Stefanik, and then I think Marsha Blackburn's the 4th. If he goes with a dude, I think it's going to be either Carson or Pompeo. Those are my 2.
What about
Now,
Byron
look,
Donalds? Do you think Byron Donalds' name's in there?
So I had Steve Bannon on the podcast the other day. We actually are pretty in sync on the list. Here's the problem with Byron Donalds. Byron Donalds is from Florida. So right now, Trump is registered in Florida. Can that be overcome?
Yeah.
Sure. Trump could re-register his in New York, and then you don't have an electoral college problem. But there's no way you're giving up the electoral votes of Florida, right? That's just not going to happen. Is Byron Donalds a great guy? Do I love the guy to death? Yeah. I mean, I enjoy his company. I think he's smart. He's dynamic. He's got that America First thing. But there's an electoral reality of this. As far as the first 4 go, I'm with you. I hate this notion that we're becoming like them, that we're putting people in boxes in the same way that they do. But that's the electoral reality. And Trump gets people and understands what's happening in a way that and he reads the environment like no one else. And I think he understands that will be a very attractive quality.
I love the idea of a Marsha Blackburn. I mean, she's a personal friend of mine, a great senator from the state of Tennessee. So I love that. That's the first time I've heard that name floated out there. But I would love it. I think it would be a good choice. I don't know, though, because I don't know if Trump cares about this, but obviously unfairly, she's been characterized in a lot of ways unfairly. But I do think that she'd be fantastic for the job, maybe not the perception and trying to get independence, but for the job, I think she'd be great.
Look, as you know, you live down there in Nashville. I've known Marsha a long time. She's extremely smart. She understands the levers of government, how to get things done. She understands the technology sector extremely well, among other things. But I love the fact of how she's taken on big tech. And so I think she would be great. The question is, look, when it comes to VP, what I've told people all the time, to quote Kamala Harris, I love Venn diagrams. And what do I mean by that? Trump has got to want you. You've got to want him. And somewhere right in that little middle is the universe of people. That's it. Right. Mm-hmm. Those are the only people that he'll want that want him. And I think there's a small pool of people that fit into that circle. I like to joke. You've all seen the Mike Pence movie. If you've been good for 4 years and you have one bad day, it ruins the whole thing, right? And so I think a lot of people are skeptical about taking the job. I think he's skeptical about a lot of people. Look, by the way, can I just put a pin in the Nikki Haley thing? Nikki Haley, I was in the Oval Office. When she wanted to step down as UN ambassador, she wasn't happy with the way things were going. I just can't believe, this gets back to my Venn diagram argument, she didn't want to be UN ambassador. That's in New York. You think she wants to sit day by day next to Donald Trump? I just can't imagine that, number one. And number two, he's always been very skeptical of her since that day, and some of the things that she said and the way that she's acted, et cetera, et cetera. So I think that they're doing a little bit of a dance here. They want her supporters to think there's a possibility that she might get on the ticket. She, I don't know about going back on boards or whatever, but I think that maybe she wants to keep the line open about another job. But I don't think it's a non-starter as far as I can see with the president.
Yeah. Oh, I hope you're right. That would be hard to stomach. I'll also say, if we had more time, I would tell you why Kristi Noem is not a good choice. But I
don't know that I like I said I'll leave it at this. I didn't say it's who I wanted. It's who I think will be in the top 4. And then the 2, I think Ben Carson, by the way, would be an interesting pick. He's obviously led a department. He's a brilliant guy. He'd add a different dynamic, but there's a lot of good choices that he has. I think the one thing that is important to understand is that people have to know what they're getting themselves into. You need to be ready day one to be president. Yes, of course. We also need to understand it is a very unique, it's a Robin to the Batman situation, with Trump obviously being Batman.
Yeah.
And I think that that's a very unique thing.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I guess we're just going to have to wait and see. It's certainly going to be interesting. Sean, I appreciate you joining and taking all the time, giving us your insight. I'm glad you brought up Marsha Blackburn. First time I've heard that. I'm going to push for that now on my platform. But thank you, and I'll talk to you soon on your show.
All right. Always love to see you. Thanks, Tomi.
All right, folks, I've said it and said it and said it. I do not believe Joe will be the Democratic nominee in 2024. I believe it will be Governor Greasy Gavin Newsom, and despite his atrocious leadership, he is still a threat. Yes, he is still a threat, even given the state of his state. Drugs, crime, poop-filled streets, tents, homelessness, needles, and at least a $38 billion budget deficit. In 2022, California Governor Gavin Newsom boasted that his state had a budget surplus of almost $98 billion. Well, flash forward just a couple of years, and Gavin is eating a piece of humble pie as he declares a budget emergency in California. This shortfall is thanks in part to his funding of illegal immigrants and their health care. So now Newsom is looking to withdraw $10.4 billion from the rainy day fund and another $2.7 billion from other state reserves. California is the fifth largest economy in the world, so to have a budget shortfall that high, you really have to try to fail that miserably. But joining me now is a man who knows a thing or two about taking on Newsom, author of The Newsom Nightmare and former Republican nominee for governor of California, John Cox. John, you literally wrote the book on the Newsom nightmare, and there's so many aspects of that nightmare. One that I still remember vividly after living in the state for 4 years. But I want to jump to kind of the latest news about this budget deficit. You know, I talked about it in my intro here. Boasted just a couple of years ago, oh, we've got a budget surplus. We're the fifth largest economy in the world, blah, blah, blah. Well, flash forward now. Things aren't looking so great. And I believe he only has one person to blame, and that's himself. But will he take ownership of this? I have a feeling not, John.
I think he has to. I think he doesn't have any choice, Tomi. Thanks for having me on. Listen, he's got a tax system that relies too much on the top 1%. A lot of them are leaving the state because of massive homelessness, a high cost of living, shortages of energy, water, and housing, a lousy education system, homeless everywhere, and of course the high taxes. And people are moving to Tennessee and Texas and Florida, and they're taking their tax dollars with them. At the same time, Newsom has massively raised salaries for a lot of people, and he's expanded the welfare state. We're now paying for the health care of illegal immigrants, people who have come across the border in violation of our laws, and they come to California and they expect to have all kinds of great health care that we offer here, including gender transitions and other things. And there's a cost for doing that. And Mr. Newsom is now going to have to face that with the huge deficit.
Yeah. Well, you're right about people leaving, and there was some discussion about, you know, a wealth tax being put in place.
Yeah.
I think even more people would leave if that comes to fruition. And then I think what's interesting, too, is that it was Governor Newsom who set up that reparations task force, and then that reparations task force came back with some astronomically high number for all the people of color in California, and he kind of had to back away from that one. Not sure how they let him get away with that one, but there's been a lot of promises made, not only to illegal immigrants, not only in the form of reparations, but also with like the unfunded liabilities, the pension programs, or the teachers unions that are expecting a lot. A lot of people don't know that underbelly of California, but when all of those things come due, I think you're going to be looking at a budget deficit much higher than the 38 or 48 billion that it is now. Am I wrong?
No, you're not wrong. And as you might remember, Tomi, I'm a CPA as well as a businessman, and the unfunded pension deficit is north of $1 trillion. I'm on the leadership council at the Hoover Institution, and the scholars there have done that work. And of course, the state doesn't even have a reserve for retiree health care. As you might know, state employees all up and down the board get retiree health care. They can retire after 30 years on 90% of their salaries. And then they get health care, gold-plated health care, by the way, that takes them until Medicare kicks in. Now, the system here is working towards a massive failure, Tomi, and my book addresses not only the problems of California, which are legion, but they also address the solution. And the solution is to get the special interests out of power, get big media out of power, put the people back into power. That's one of the reasons I ran for governor against Newsom to begin with. because Newsom is all about giving power to these interest groups and to the media, and they don't have necessarily the best interest of the people at heart. They're looking to feather their own nest, and Newsom takes advantage of that because he takes their money. But the people deserve to have a government that's run for them and not for these interest groups. So I hope we get a chance to talk about that.
How do we get good people elected, though? That's what I want to know. I do believe there's a solution, but I think it's getting over that barrier of how do you get Republicans elected? How do you even get more moderate Democrats elected? And not even just in gubernatorial races, but how do you just get them all over that state? I mean, there's some conservative enclaves, but by and large, that state is run by Democrats, and it feels like it's insurmountable. Do you see a solution to solve that first hurdle?
Well, first of all, Tommy, it's run by not just the Democrats, it's run by the media and the special interest groups. And here I'm talking about the unions, I'm talking about the lobbyists, I'm talking about the extreme environmental groups, the trial lawyers. All of these groups flood Sacramento with money. And, they do the same thing in Washington, D.C., Tommy. And that's what my proposed solution that I talk about in my book, The Newsom Nightmare, the solution I'm talking about can be found at hearthepeople.org. Basically, we're talking about putting the Congress of the United States back where the founders intended it, and that is in the hands of the people. Congressional districts are just too large these days, 750,000 people. What Here the People is proposing is a restructuring, basically subdividing those congressional districts into 100 little tiny community districts. And each of those community districts, 7,500 people, will elect a local representative, a community representative. Those 100 then will select the person who goes to Washington to be the congressman. In this way, Tommy, nobody would need much money to get elected. If you're going to only run in a community district of only 7,500 people, that's only a few thousand households. You're not going to need big media. You're not going to need special interest money in order to get elected. You're going to get elected by going and talking to your constituents and your voters, and they're going to get to know you. You're going to get to know them. They're going to evaluate you based upon your character and your competence and your leadership abilities. And then we will have a congressman who really represents the people and not these interest groups and the media. And I think that will filter all the way through our political structure so that, we finally get leadership in Washington and maybe in Sacramento that reflects the people and not these lobbyists and not these interest groups and not big media.
And especially the teachers union and other unions there. The teachers union has Gavin Newsom in a stranglehold. Last thing I want to ask you, because, you wrote the book on the Newsom nightmare. I've been saying it since January of last year. I think that Gavin Newsom, come convention time, I think Gavin Newsom will make a play to be the nominee. I sincerely think it's going to be Gavin. A lot of people saying, oh, Michelle Obama, maybe Kamala. I feel like it's Gavin. I feel like he's been running a shadow campaign for months, if not years now. What do you think the chances are that Gavin throws his name in come convention time to replace Joe?
First of all, I think you're right. I think Joe Biden just cannot physically or mentally handle the job. And frankly, too, the policies he's put forth have really put his approval rating at a record low level. Kamala's is even lower than that, so I can't see a convention going to them. I think Biden will go to the Democratic convention. He'll have all the delegates lined up, and at that point, he'll make an impassioned speech about how he's committed 60 years of life to the country, but it's enough. He's going to let the conventioneers decide who the nominee is going to be, and then they're going to, decide. I think you're right. I think Newsom will put his name in. He's been traveling around. He's been to China. He's been to Israel. He'll put his name in there. I think Gretchen Whitmer of Michigan will also be there. Maybe Josh Shapiro of Pennsylvania. Those are swing states. And Newsom will certainly be there. And he's got a good case to make. He's glib. He's well-spoken.
Well, he is until he has to debate somebody on the right, like Governor Ron DeSantis, and then his tongue is not so silver when it comes to that. But I think I think that we're both right. I think it's going to be Gavin. I don't just think he's going to try. I think he will be the nominee. They'll pay off Kamala in some way, shape, or form. But that's why it's so important that people read the Newsom nightmare so they know what they're getting themselves into. John, yes. Where can people get your book, read up on your problems and your solutions to get rid of Newsom and save California?
Well, it's available on Amazon. It's called The Newsom Nightmare. And they can also read about the Hear the People reform at hearthepeople.org. That's HEAR, hearthepeople.org. And we're going to start to put this in place, maybe in a state. We might select Arizona, and I think it's going to sweep the nation. I think the people have had it up to here. They're fed up with government that's run by these interest groups and by the big media. We need accountable government. We need congressmen that are accountable to the people. And we need the truth. We need to have leadership that will make this country better. And that's important for not just America, but for the world.
Oh, I think we're all hoping for that. Thank you for all the work that you've done. Thank you for taking on Newsom, not only running against Newsom, but also writing about Newsom. It's important we're all educated. John, I appreciate your time and best of luck to you guys in California.
Thanks, Tommy. Really appreciate it. Great to be with you.
You as well. All right, folks, last but not least tonight, some personal reflections on the race, the state of the GOP, mega, and my message to Governor Ron DeSantis. It's time for Final Thoughts. All right, my friends, it's time for some truth serum. Donald Trump will be the GOP nominee. Iowa was the test, and while everyone else put in a good effort and a lot of money and time and resources, Trump took it home. Now, this party and this movement is still captained by Donald Trump, and Iowa, while not the only state in the nation or the most important, well, proved it. So it's time to galvanize around Trump, and that means it's time for the rest of the pack to do the same. Now, I don't expect icky Nikki Haley to do that anytime soon because she's a narcissist and in it for herself. The longer she stays in, the more name ID she has and the more money she can make after she's eventually smoked by Trump in due time. But as for Governor Ron DeSantis, he does care about this party and this country. He did his damnedest in Iowa, but as one of my Fox News colleagues put it the other night, Ron DeSantis, at least right now, is like the nice guy rebound after a breakup. Donald Trump is the ex that still has your heart, and though that might lead to heartbreak, the heart wants what it wants. The movement still wants Donald Trump, so it's time to unite behind that. Now, I firmly believe Ron DeSantis is the future of this party. He is the greatest governor in the country by a mile. But it's time for him to cut his losses for 24, go back to Florida, govern the hell out of it, and then return with the wind behind his back in 28. But let me also say this. To the only Trump social media militia who feels it's fun or fulfilling to come after DeSantis and DeSantis supporters after Iowa, shame on you, because we are not your enemy. I am not your enemy. And in fact, some of us have been mega since before you were. So instead of trying to tear down DeSantis supporters, the Trump social media army should embrace the fact that we are all on one team and we are ready to fight for Donald Trump, given we now know he is going to be our nominee. So would you rather us say we'd never vote for Trump? Would you prefer that? Get out of here with that junk. Some of us feel DeSantis would have a better shot at winning the general election, but that's not the cards that have been dealt, and we understand that, and we're ready to put our voices and our platforms in support of Donald Trump because that's the right thing to do. So it is time for unity. It's time to come together. It's time to aim the targets at the ones who are openly trying to destroy this country. I've got my head in the game, and I'm laser focused on that. So if you want to play some dumbass social media war, you can fight yourselves. Eyes on the prize, eyes on victory, eyes on making America great again. Those are my final thoughts from Nashville. God bless and take care.